We will start with Ukraine. President Putin has accused the West of making Russia the enemy after the EU agreed to a deal to give Ukraine a €90 billion loan to help its war effort. Mr. Putin has been giving his end-of-year speech. Was asked by our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg, what the future holds for his country.
You deceived us, not you personally, but the Western figures created the situation of today with their own hands. And they continue to escalate the situation, speaking all the time that they are preparing for war with Russia. But as far as I know, you live here for many years. But I think you understand it, and those who speak about war with Russia also understand it. Are we truly going to attack Europe? This is nonsense. This is done based on the political reasons, and this is done to create the image of an enemy. They are creating an image of an enemy, and they're making Russia the enemy to hide the mistakes that were made systemically for leaders, for many Western leaders for several years in economy, in the sphere of social policy.
Well, the loan is interest-free and will only have to be paid back if Russia agrees to pay Ukraine reparations. EU leaders failed to reach an agreement on using frozen Russian assets valued at more than €200 billion. President Zelensky welcomed the financial support, saying, "Together we are defending the future of our continent."
Well, the BBC has also been speaking to Sir Richard Knighton today. That's the UK's chief of the defence staff, about what support the UK can offer Ukraine.
The support that we would provide as UK would be to that regeneration capability, but also, as the Prime Minister has said, putting boots on the ground to support safe skies and safe seas, so that Ukraine can have the space and time to regenerate its armed forces and be ready to defend itself.
So we would see British troops on the ground?
That's exactly what the Prime Minister is committed to, and we're ready right now. So as soon as a peace agreement is made and we understand the context of that, then we are ready to put forces onto the ground to support Ukraine.
Separately, Ukraine says its security forces have, for the first time, hit a Russian tanker in the Mediterranean Sea using a drone. Ukraine claims the sub was a part of Russia's shadow fleet, which are used to avoid Western sanctions.
Well, if confirmed, this would be a somewhat audacious attack, thousands of miles from the front lines, and a message, I guess, to Moscow that Ukraine will fight the Russian war machine wherever it is. Let's have a word with Andrew Levy, who's a former senior British diplomat, was posted to Moscow, was also an advisor to Gordon Brown and David Miliband on the UK's Russia policy. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. Just on these, well, on the loan, what is your assessment of the failure to use frozen Russian assets, first of all? Because there was so much talk around this yesterday, of course.
Yes, I don't think it's a major problem. The assets have been sequestered. They've been locked away by EU arrangements now. That means Russia can't get their hands back on them. And the EU has put together this package, which you've mentioned, of €90 billion, which probably will fund Ukraine for maybe 18 months, which gives a runway to arrange more funding. And €90 billion, to put that in context, the collective annual economic output of the EU is about €20,000 billion. So this is really a very affordable amount of money.
Do you think the reason not to go for those frozen Russian assets was because of the fears that the Belgians, amongst others, expressed? Or do you think it was because of the threats that we were hearing from the Russians?
I think both played a role, but I also think that suggesting that the frozen assets would be used was a pretty good way to focus attention on the need to do something and get money out, as I say, a small sum of money for a really important cause out of a huge economic grouping.
Yeah. Within that grouping, you've got Hungary, you've got Slovakia, and you've got the Czech Republic. Now, they only agreed to support this plan to give this money if they were exempt from it individually. And Hungary and Slovakia in particular are known to be closer to the Kremlin, aren't they? And I just wonder, how sustainable a position is that when you have European nations trying to show a united front alongside the UK, of course?
Yeah, another way of looking at it is that 3 out of 27 countries are taking a different view under their present leaderships, and they were outmaneuvered and they couldn't block anything. So that's also the case with this sequestering, this locking away of the Russian assets. Previously, that had to be renewed every so often, and you had to get a unanimous vote in the EU, which of course Hungary or one of the other countries could have vetoed. Now, on both fronts, they've been outmaneuvered. So although it's bad that they are not supporting Ukraine, from my perspective anyway, they have been weakened in their ability to influence events.
Right, okay. Clearly, some countries are more concerned than others, and I suppose at the top of the heap after Ukraine is probably Poland, isn't it? And you had the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk saying that EU leaders had a clear decision to make. In his words, he said, pay the money today or pay in blood tomorrow. And then he went on to say he wasn't talking about Ukraine, he was talking about the whole of Europe. Is that the kind of rhetoric you support?
I think the point behind his words is correct, that Putin has a dynamic which has been pushing him, by the way, for 25 years, to wage war. He did so in Chechnya, which is inside the Russian Federation, but it was a war, an internal war, designed to bolster his power as he came into the presidency back in 1999-2000. He invaded Georgia in 2008. He invaded Ukraine in 2014. That was the Crimea occupation, and he invaded again in 2022, and that dynamic isn't changing. And what's the next place? Poland, Baltic states, somewhere else. He'll keep pushing. And by the way, the UK is on the front line. We don't look like it on a map, but there's the sea, the internet cables. Yep. There's a heck of a lot which affects us.
But you do have those voices saying, you know, European nations actually need to be more on the front foot, given exactly what you've just said. I mean, I know there's other people who want a much more measured approach, but I wonder then how you feel what we were saying in the introduction there about Ukraine saying its security forces have for the first time hit a Russian tanker in the Med using a drone. Ukraine claiming the sub was a part of Russia's shadow fleet, which are used to avoid Western sanctions. What are your thoughts on action like that?
Yeah, Ukraine's ability to pursue its defensive aims militarily at long range, whether sort of ranged fire with these sort of battlefield missiles that can go many kilometers, or whether it's much more distant targets, including in the Mediterranean, which are critical to Ukraine's defense, in this case, stopping Russian exports of oil, circumventing sanctions and so on. Ukraine needs those capabilities, and it's good that they are developing those and using them increasingly.
Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Levy, former senior British diplomat who was posted to Russia. It is 4:15.